Run, party, repeat. Welcome to the East Coast Adventures Dirt and Vert podcast, where we talk all things running, racing, and training to help you get ready for your next big adventure.
Learn from our successes and our failures, and have fun at the same time. Join us right here every week with inspiring guests who share their captivating tales from the trails. And remember, nobody cares.
Run faster. All right, welcome back to the Dirt and Vert podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Matt.
And we have a guest with us today that we got the pleasure of meeting back in 2023 at a race that some of you may know as the last annual Vol State 500K, a little run across Tennessee. But we have Ken Zemach with us, who was actually the 2023 King of the Road. So Ken ran Vol State in just a little over 3 days that year. Absolutely crushed it.
3 days.
And that was actually the first time we got to meet Ken. Absolutely amazing. Where it took me 5 days.
6 days.
But Ken, if you don't care, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into running.
Okay, so I started really running seriously when I was 39. But to be fair, I was a bit of an athlete in high school, not a runner. I was a downhill ski racer. So there was a lot of training and sort of endurance stuff involved there. So it's not quite fair to say, oh, I just, got off the couch at age 39 and started running. I'd done rock climbing and mountain biking and windsurfing and backpacking and skiing and, also mountaineering and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's not quite like at age 39 I started running. I ended up starting running at age 39 because I was in Iraq. I'm not in the service. I was not in the service. I was a contractor doing technology work for the Army. And we are our own harshest critics, but sometimes we're also maybe a little too forgiving on ourselves. And we were working on an armored vehicle project, and I'm looking at the pictures afterwards from that day, and I see this guy on top of an armored vehicle, and his head is cut out of the picture. And I just, you don't want to be judgy, but I was like, wow, who's that fat ass? and then I realized I literally had not recognized myself, because my head wasn't in the picture.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, I was 198 pounds, just not overly large, right? I'm 4'23", aka 5'11". So, but 198's, my belly was hanging over my belt, and, I could have lost a few pounds. Not an image thing as much as just a health issue. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'd always struggled with my weight on and off, and then I'd, take up something or try and diet, and just never really got anywhere. And so I said, okay, that is it. Either I get control of my health, or I'm going to quit this job. Like I have to do something. I'm 39 years old, and I was going through a bunch of, it's a long story. We don't need to get into it. I was going through a bunch of personal stuff at the time. So I'm stressed, and I'm in a war zone, and, which is also high stress, and there's unlimited food, and we didn't get out of the gate that much. And so I was like, okay, what do I do to get in shape and get control of my health? Like, well, I need to, of course, the right answer is just to eat less. But I thought, okay, what can I do? I can run. And then we were at this place called Lost Lake. It was actually the compound where they kept Saddam about a third of the time was 100 yards from us. And I could run around that. And I met this other contractor named Tommy, whose last name will remain nameless because of what Tommy did. But Tommy was 50 years old at the time when I was 39. He was training for a 50 miler. And I said, you know what? I need a goal. If Tommy can run 50 miles at age 50, I can run 50 miles. So I got online, found an ultra marathon coach, and said, I want to run a 50 miler. That's my goal. And then I'll be out of Iraq and I'm going to, run my race, and then I'm done and I'm going back to mountain biking or rock climbing or something way more fun. So I trained and I lost 35 pounds over the next year. I got to my 50 miler. I ran it. My plan was run a 50 miler and then quit. Done with running. Go to something more interesting. I ran the 50 miler and then I thought, well, that went pretty well. Maybe since I'm in shape for running right now, this is my one opportunity to run a 100 miler, because I'm not going through that buildup again. So I signed up for a 100 miler. That was the Javelina 100. And I told my coach, all right, I'm going to run this 100 miler and then I'm quitting. Then I'm done. So I ran Javelina and I got done with it. I said, well, okay, I've run a 100 miler, but it wasn't a hard 100 miler. I need to do a mountain 100. Then I'm going to be done. And so I ran Cascade Crest. And at that point, I realized, okay, I'm not done. And I was hooked.
I love the fact
that's kind of how I got into it. I mean, there's a lot in there, but I think it was more not because I loved running, not because I wanted to be a runner, not because I wanted to tell people that I could run long distances. I just wanted to get in shape, and running was that medium.
So, not to jump into all those details, but did some of your personal issues push you into doing something like that too? Like you said, you were going through a lot of personal stuff. So,
well, I'll overshare for a moment. So I'm in Iraq. My ex-girlfriend is pregnant with our child. She's British, not speaking to me, living in England. So I'm about to have a child that I'm being told by my ex I'm never going to be allowed to see. Which, by the way, that's all gotten resolved. Like, no, I'm not picking on her or anything.
Yeah.
And, we all made mistakes, and so let's not over dramatize this. But I mean, that's a long story. I'd met my now ex, the mother of my daughter. I'd met her in a monastery in Syria. Which, if you think is a strange story, that is just the beginning. She was at a monastery in Syria because she taught herself Arabic, fluent Arabic, while she was in the hospital from getting a pacemaker put in at age 28. But because she had died, because her heart had failed, but she was rescued because she was in the cardiac ward of a hospital when she died, because she was running the cardiac ward, because she wanted to go into public service, which she decided to do after being a stockbroker in the World Trade Center when it got hit by a plane. So, I mean, we're still just getting started. Anyway, this is not about that, but it's a long tale of odd stories. So anyway, I'm in Iraq, about to have a child out of wedlock with somebody who is not speaking to me, and I'm not happy with my life. I'm not happy with my life choices. I'm not happy with my health. And I'm like, what can I control? You know what? It was a control. Maybe in an odd addiction way, it was a control issue. What can I control? I can't control that my ex won't speak to me. I can't control that I'm about to have a child that I had never planned. I can't control that I am not a British citizen, can't even live in that country. I can't control a lot of things. What can I control? I can control my health. Not in a eating disorder kind of control-ish issue, but more in I know I can fix this.
Yeah.
And running was one of those tools that I applied as a tool. Not out of love, not out of desire to be a runner at that time, just as a half-coping mechanism.
Had you ran any at all when you decided to do this endeavor?
Other than running as training for skiing back in high school, no, not really.
Wow.
But again, to say that I was an off-the-couch person who'd never been an athlete is not fair.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But at the same time, you were also 190 pounds and out of shape. And so it's not like you and
I've
and
been
not
there,
like
Ken.
you probably weren't continuing that lifestyle at that point, right? Like you still weren't as active.
I mean, you mean no, 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 no. When I was 100, I had stopped exercising. I'd stopped eating well. I just, I mean, life gets in the way, and you're stressed. And
Yeah.
I stress eat all the time. I'm a stress eater.
Mm.
It's
So
fine.
did you leave the job?
No, I didn't because I got my act under control because I got an online ultra marathon coach, uh, whom I actually recommended to Zach Lever, and he uses it now. Great guy, Paul DeWitt, lives in North Carolina,
Cool.
and uh, and Paul gave me a schedule. Now I had somebody to answer to, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the real value of having a quote
Accountability.
unquote coach. It's the accountability,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
absolutely.
Who are you accountable to? Now we would all love to be accountable to ourselves, right? that's where I want to be, which is where I am now. But it took a lot of training and discipline to get there.
Well, and it's two ways too. Like having a coach, it's the accountability, but also keeping you from doing something stupid. Which is, I'm going to start out and run 100 miles this week. Like that stuff.
That's a fair statement. Yeah. Yeah.
Because we all know when you start this and you have a little bit of success, like with, I finished my first 50, I finished my first 100, you think, well, now I'm going to crank up the volume.
Oh,
that doesn't work. Like,
well, that absolutely happened to me. So I ran the 50 miler, which I can't remember what it was, something in California. Then I ran, Javelina, and then you'll see there's a little break in there, and that's because then look, muscles build fast, tendons and ligaments do not build fast.
Mm-hmm.
And at age 39, now 40, I ended up with an IT band issue, a serious IT band issue. Like it felt like somebody was stabbing an ice pick in the side of my knee. I couldn't run more than 10 or 15 feet for 9 months.
wow.
Saw 4 physical therapists, 2 doctors, a chiropractor, MRI, cortisone shot in my knee. Nothing fixed it until I had an internet date with another physical therapist. Literally an internet date. I'd already seen like 4 physical therapists and a bunch of doctors, including the Stanford track team doctor who, invented the fix for IT band syndrome. None of these people could fix me. And I had an internet date with a physical therapist. And so I'm like, oh, you're a physical therapist. And she's like, well, let me see how they're evaluating you. So on our second date, she's like, let me evaluate you. She said, not all physical therapists are the same. She evaluated me and she said, I want you to check your side leg strength to see how your glute medius is and whatnot. And I said, oh, they've all done that. She's like, okay, well, get your leg up. And she's like, wait a minute, you're not in the right position. She's like, is this position how they all tested you? And I said, yeah. She goes, well, they all did it wrong. So she gave me then she took one finger and pushed my leg down. It's like, you're weak as a kitten. So they evaluated you wrong. You need major core and glute and, gave me a whole bunch of exercises and fixed me. And I married her. And that's my wife.
There you go.
Wow.
So there's more accountability.
Oh yeah. With my recent injury, all she does, she won't treat me anymore because we're married. She just gives me shit. She's like, yeah, you got injured because
Ken's all kinds of full of stories.
Well, I see that you had it's almost like 8 to 9 month break between Javelina and then that next 50K you did. So yeah, I see that. But I'm also kind of impressed because your very first 100 miler.
That's 2 years.
Oh yeah, it is 2 years. Never mind, I can't count. But Javelina, your very first 100 miler, 18 hours. That's pretty impressive for like your very first 100 miler because most people's first 100 miler does not go well.
Yeah, it went pretty well. Well, the thing is remember, I didn't know anything about running. I had never run marathons, right? And so I just didn't know. And I started with a coach. I started with a good coach. And his opinion, he had some strong opinions. He said he thought he said, look, my fastest 100-miler I ever ran, I was 11% slower the second half. This whole standard 30% slower your second half than the first half. He's like, that's crap. And we could have a long discussion about pacing because I'm adamant about pacing. And so he also knew that I was a new runner, and neither he nor I thought I was very fast, relatively. It's all relative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was training at these paces that were probably, he told me my goal for this 100, and I believed him, should be like, I said I wanted to break 24 hours. And he's like, I think you can break 24. And I said, honestly, I did my pace chart. I think I could break 22. He's like, you're not going to break 22. He's like, no, based on your training, you're not going to break 22. I'm like, oh, okay. So I went out at a 22-hour pace, right? Which turned out to be great because then by 50 miles, I felt super fresh and I could just keep running, right?
Mm-hmm.
which gets to the whole, even split, negative split. I don't know if you guys have ever had Bob Hearn on. He's fascinating. But, between Bob Hearn and Nick Curry, I am a believer in what both of them say, is that if it is not the fastest way, it is possibly the most enjoyable way to run 100, to run an even or negative split. All terrain, weather, darkness, notwithstanding. And I, from my experience and from the races where I have come close to even or negative splits in 100-milers and the ones where I haven't, it's a world of difference. Every race where I come close to an even split is not only faster, but it's more enjoyable. And so I am, when I run a quote unquote race, my goal is not place. My goal is experience and enjoyment. So take Vol State. Vol State has this reputation for just being brutal. And I don't want to say I didn't care about how fast I ran it. I would say I cared an incredible amount about how I optimized it. So, I was counting grams. I weighed everything before I got there. I carried a bare minimum of stuff. I didn't have a pack. I did it screwed with no pack. I used 2 naked bands, right? Those stretchy naked bands. And in 2 naked bands, I could fit spare shorts, spare socks, charger, phone, 5 hours of food, 3 water bottles, medical kit, sewing kit, emergency this. I don't know. What else do you need? Yep. And I actually have, I could send you guys my spreadsheet. I have everything broken down to the gram. It just wasn't that much. So it wasn't because I wanted to win, but I did want to optimize it. I wanted to optimize it for the experience to do the best that I could do. And that includes mental state. So I didn't bring any headphones. I listened to no music. I listened to no podcasts. And I didn't listen to any music or podcasts because I wanted to have the experience, like the experience of Vol State. Music medicates. We all know this. Like I will listen to music in some 100-milers when it's dark out, and you want to kind of medicate your mind, and it's a performance enhancer. But to me, Vol State was about the experience, and I didn't want to medicate it. I wanted to really see if I could enjoy the whole thing. And as much as Laz likes to say how miserable it is and how tough it is and how horrible it is and everybody suffers, other than getting cornered by a dog for 10 minutes, I swear to God, there was not a 5-second period where I was unhappy in that entire race.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I focused on smiling, on waving to cars, on saying hello to people, and on laughing at myself. Yeah, was I sore? Sure. Did it hurt? Sure. But I focused on enjoying the experience.
What did you do? So you wore 2 naked belts. Did you have 2 bottles that you were just carrying with you?
I had two collapsible soft flasks of 20 ounces each, and maybe 22. And then there was one stretch where I carried like a couple of Coke cans in my hands, where I went 5 hours without refill, and got really thirsty. But I planned on drinking out of streams or whatever, garbage cans or whatever. I didn't have to, but I did beg some water off a camper. But that's the Vol State experience.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and I got to give you credit, because like it sounds like you really had planned this out some, as far as like you weighed everything and knew exactly what you were taking.
To the gram.
I was a complete shit show, so I just took everything I had and ended up throwing stuff away on day 2, like literally just throwing stuff in a trash can that was like expensive stuff that I wished I would have kept, but it was just like way too much. But I didn't, I've got to be better at that part, like the planning and strategy. I'm just going to show up and run. That's what I do. I try not to overthink things a lot, but that experience, it didn't work so well.
Yeah, but some people are planners and some aren't. I enjoy the planning process. I do pace charts, exacting pace charts down to the minute for every race. Now, how's that saying go? Plans are useless. Planning is everything. Like, I had a pace chart for Vol State that I think got me out at like 5 days and something. My plan was to come into the low 5 days. That was my plan. That's what I thought.
Did you follow any of that pacing chart in the beginning?
No, well, no, I never follow the pacing chart. Your pace, you run by feel, right?
Yeah,
and you
absolutely.
run with a goal. All right, maybe not in Vol State for a negative split, but if it's a 100-miler, I'll have a pace chart down to the minute. And again, plans are useless. Planning is everything. So let's say I get to the second aid station and I'm 20% behind my plan. Great. I go, great. Now I know what my pace is. It's going to be 20% behind all of my estimates, right? It's not, you don't stick to a rigid plan. The practice of planning is the important part. Plans are useless. Planning is everything. The military people know all these sayings. No plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? The enemy gets a vote, right? Yeah. You are not in control. But the reason you do operational planning is so that when shit hits the fan, you know what your options are. Or if you have a pace chart and you say, I'm going to finish this race in 20 hours, and you get 20% through and it's taking you 8 hours, you're like, okay, I guess it's going to take me 40 hours, right? Mm-hmm. You don't go, oh my God, I have to run faster to stick to my plan. No, the act of having done the plan tells you everything you need to know about the rest of the race. So yeah, I had a pace plan for Vol State. It went out of the window. They all go out the window, but I still used that knowledge. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So what was like your fueling like? I know, did you have any plan there? Or did you just hit any gas station or whatever you could find?
I hit any gas. I mean, I was more concerned about the time in between. It's the whole unknown unknowns about what's going to be open when. You get to some of these places and you're like, oh, this, Google Maps says this place is open, and you get there and it's Sunday morning and it's 11 a.m. and they're like, there's a sign on the door, we're at church. It's like, okay, well, I guess that's not going to happen. And, that's the beauty of those things. No, I'm lucky in that I can eat almost anything usually. I am vegetarian. I try and be vegan, although I certainly didn't try that at Vol State.
Yeah.
Although people have been vegan at Vol State, I don't know how they do it.
I think Kaz, the lady I ran with, Kaz Williams, the whole time. We would get to like different gas stations and stuff, and she'd walk in. She'd like, I need bread, and do you got potato wedges? And she would make potato wedges, little sandwiches, and that's all she would eat. She would take a whole bunch with her. And she would go.
Kaz is amazing. I mean, the discipline to hold to that. I mean, the great thing about relaxing being vegan and being vegetarian is like, okay, milk chocolate, no problem. right? But if
Yeah.
you're vegan, you can't have a candy bar
Yep.
because there's milk in there.
Yep.
Cast in deep chocolate. Unbelievable.
The whole time I was with her, I probably ran with her from, I think it's Lewisburg, all the way to the finish line. We were together almost the whole time. We would separate maybe 3 or 4 miles. Like I would get out, or she would get out, then we'd all meet back up, all the way to Kimball. We got there together. We got to the hotel, got our trackers, and then we separated. And then I caught her again going up Sand Mountain, and then,
Well, if I didn't have chocolate milk, we would not have finished Fall State. So I had so many chocolate milks in that race. I mean, it was just like, that's calories and fat and protein. I was just like,
I mean, like the thought of not having chocolate, it's like, you want a challenge? Why don't you just run with one shoe?
Well, that's Walt. He went with no shoes.
Yeah, who went with flip-flops. Because he blistered his feet so bad.
Oh man,
he's quite
what was the? So, did you have any experience at Vol State that was kind of crazy, or anything that you truly remember that was like just different?
God, this is gonna sound horrible, but I mean, okay, getting cornered by the dog, okay, that sucked. And I was kind of pissed that nobody would stop to help me as all these cars drive by as this dog is lunging at me and I'm whacking it with a stick. But that was, it was terrifying. So there was that 10 minutes of fear. And then I ran like 6.5-minute miles. That is off the backside of the mountain. And then I finally, a row of cars went in between me and the dog and I took off in a sprint downhill. And that's how I got away.
Wow.
But
was that at Mont Eagle?
Sorry?
Was that Mont Eagle or going down?
Yeah, Mont Eagle. Yeah,
Mont Eagle.
Yeah. Down. Yeah, it was terrifying. But I mean, honestly, it was all great. I wish I had this amazing. You listen to all these podcasts before you do it. Like, I had to eat out of a trash can and I had to sleep in a cemetery. And I slept in an abandoned warehouse and I slept in a ditch on the side of the road for a few minutes. But these aren't real Full State stories. Everything. I know it pissed Bob Hurt off, but I just didn't have any problems. Did
you at least stop and sit in the bench of despair?
No, I missed it.
No.
I guess when we were driving by, nobody pointed it out. I guess everybody was talking about it, but I was looking at the other side of the bus and I never saw it. I didn't know where it was. I just didn't even occur to me. Never signed it, never sat on it, never, to my knowledge, even saw it.
You must have went through it at night right there or something. Just like,
I went through it at night and I laid under that little carport area for like an hour, took a nap for maybe an hour. And then I got up, took my picture, and then I went to the nut house. And then they had, I think, burgers or something there. I was very happy in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So I get to ask you this question because not a lot of people have done both of these races that we've had on here. So Fall State and Badwater, how do those two experiences compare?
Okay, let me back up and give a slightly different answer, and then I'll compare those because you might be going after which is harder, and I just say they're different.
No. I just want to know the difference, like because they're both really hot road races. That's one thing you can say about both of them.
Yeah, and the training for them is very similar, in my opinion. If you want to not have a shitty time, so let me back up and say one thing. If you look at the stuff I've run. It's, there's some road stuff. There's Spartathlon and Badwater and Vol State, but there's also, Swiss Alps and Hard Rock and Plain and, there's a bunch of mountain stuff. States. There's mountains, there's roads, there's hot, there's cold. The one thing you won't see is any repeats.
Yep.
Really? With the exception of one called Euchre Bar Massacre, but that's because it's sort of Barkley-esque and the course changes every year. And so I have this thing. I don't run races twice because there are so many experiences out there that if I ran, let's say once you've run Hard Rock once, it's easier to get into it again. And you're not a hard rocker unless you run it in both directions, whatever. if I ran Hard Rock twice, a second time, then I wouldn't have run Crazy Mountain. And if I ran Crazy Mountain twice, then I wouldn't have run Scout Mountain. And if I run Vol State twice, then I like the different experiences.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't wear headphones at Vol State. I wanted to experience it because I'm going to do it once. I'm doing it
I remember
once. Yeah.
when we were sitting at the Chinese restaurant, you were telling somebody that. I'm like, I thought that was pretty interesting because you said that, you explained it there too, about if you do this race, you couldn't do that race. And I mean, that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, there's a different value in running the same race. There's a community around that.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I see a lot of the same people occasionally, but you don't build the ties that you build going to Badwater every year or Vol State every year, where there's a lot of repeat people. There is a family aspect to repeating a race like Moab 240 every year because there's a bunch of people that redo it every year. That's their event. So I do miss out on that community experience.
Yeah.
It becomes almost more of a solo experience, but I like the differences. If I had the time, which I don't because of my job and whatnot, I'd love to do the Iditarod, right? And Arrowhead and some of these winter things. Just, again, different experience. So now, answering your question, Vol State and Badwater, I would say some of why I did not suffer at Vol State is directly out of Badwater. And what I learned about Badwater, because it was like my fourth 100-miler ever, is I was terrified going in. So I researched the ever-living crap out of it. You should see my pace chart for that. And, everyone says you got to heat train. And so I read scientific papers on heat training. I studied heat training. I, talked to people, and I heat trained the crap out of myself for Badwater. And one thing that I was doing when I was, early on in my training, because I'm a data guy, is I'd wear a heart rate monitor, not one of these stupid wrist ones that never work, but a heart rate monitor strap. And so since I would wear that every single run, including when I'm on a treadmill or I'm on the flats or whatever, very in tune with what my pace was at my sort of maffetone level heart rate, sort of your easy heart rate. So I do, it was like 5 or maybe 6 weeks of intense sauna training before Badwater. That's how paranoid I was. And what I found was that my flat pace, and I have this data, it's not psychosomatic. My pace on the flats for a same run at a similar temperature, outside in California where I was living at the time, at the same heart rate, dropped by over 15 seconds a mile. That is what heat training did for me. Name any other training that you can do, any other training, that at the same effort you can drop your pace by 15 seconds a mile in 6 weeks. There's nothing.
That's good.
The effects of heat training are phenomenal. And I got out to Badwater, got to run it. I got lucky. I got to run it the last year they did a morning start before the Park Service shut that down. And it was a hot year. The unofficial air temperature was 128 Fahrenheit. That's air temperature in the shade, but it was sunny. I did so much heat training. It was fun.
Yeah, so you had a great performance.
I had a great time because I was heat trained. So I applied that exact same logic to Vol State. And because I got into Western States after I got into Vol State. So I ran Western States as my warm-up for Vol State. Because both of those, Western States turned out not to be a hot race that year, but because both of those have, reputations as being hot races, I'm like, this is basically the same race. Western States is mountains, but it's a downhill race. It's a quad pounder. Well, what are flat races? They're quad pounders. So the training's the same. They're both hot races. I need to do sauna training. So by the time I rolled into Vol State, I basically had 4 weeks of intense sauna training. And we could talk about what that entails. But everyone was talking about how hot it was at Vol State. I don't know what you're talking about. Compared to being in a sauna where the air temperature at your head level is, 185, 190 Fahrenheit, and I'm not exaggerating. Okay. I'm not talking training. I don't by sauna training, I don't mean running or doing sit-ups. I mean just sitting there half an hour, awful temperature. Your body changes. And Vol State, I did not find, it's probably part of why I didn't suffer. Bob did not heat train for Vol State last year. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's what killed him.
Now, does he normally heat train?
Same thing. So he does something in the sauna. I don't know if he exercises in the sauna or does passive sauna. Passive sauna training is fantastic, especially if you're going to do a hot race.
Yeah.
I don't know. How much do you want to suffer? I don't want to suffer. I want to have fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and a lot of
happen anyway. But
a lot of my training I have to do during the middle of the day.
Yeah.
So I do it in the summer, middle of the day, noon, 1 o'clock, because that's when I get my lunch break, and that's when I run. And to your point, like that's helped my heart rate and stuff come down so much when I'm running a pace. And now that it's starting to cool off, I can see how much of a difference that is. Now I'm running a faster pace and my heart rate's still not getting that high. And I'm just like that. The heat training really does help you so much. Now, granted, in Ball State, it was a whole different issue for me. It wasn't the heat; it was just everything else. But I've done that for the last few years, and I think that truly helps me because I would much rather run when it's hot. I hate running in the cold.
I do too,
but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean heat training, and look, I can't speak to training when like running when it's hot out because I don't have that opportunity, so I've never done it. But heat training in the sauna is the best bang for the buck you can get.
So what does your heat training look like? Do you have a target days per week, minutes per day?
So if I'm going to, I only do it before hot races. Now, would it help on cold races? Of course it would help, but I'm time limited. And so you do it when it really counts. So so I'm signed up for HOTS this year and I'm super excited about HOTS. Because HOTS,
400 miles, baby.
HOTS to me, well, let's see if I'm still injured. But HOTS, I may be walking it. HOTS to me is what Vol State is probably more the experience that I wanted at Vol State that I frankly cheated myself out of because I researched it so much. So I could research it in a way that the original Vol Staters couldn't. It's not just, all right, being one of the faster people on that course, I missed a lot of the angel stations because they weren't there, right?
Yeah.
You're ahead of them. But I read on the internet, I'm like, okay, I know there's a spring on whatever the Mont Eagle mountain is, part way up. And I kind of knew what to look for. And HOTS is not going to be that. So I will definitely, assuming I actually run HOTS, injury dependent, right? I'm in this for the long haul. I'd rather be running when I'm 80 than go out in a flash at HOTS and trash my knee, right?
Yeah.
So here's what it would look like. I would do at least 3 straight weeks of heat training, which means in a sauna at least 6 days a week at night because you abuse yourself so badly you can't physically train after that. So I would run in the morning or run in the day. Then at night, you go in to a sauna that is turned up as high as you can possibly get it. No IR saunas. Forget that. Like full on heat sauna. Mm-hmm. And being a geek, like for Badwater, I brought in a temperature monitor with 2 thermocouples so I could measure and record the temperature.
I love it.
But you're my head at the head level, which is much hotter than your because heat rises. You're at sort of 90 degrees centigrade, sort of the 190, 195 Fahrenheit. We're talking people who don't know will be like, that's impossible. Your head would boil, like you would die. No, that's not true. And you get in there, and when you first start this, you might be in for 13 minutes, and then you're crawling out on your hands and your knees. I mean, we are talking oppressively hot. Stimulus, response. Stimulus, response. You need the stimulus to get the response. And so I will go in a brutally hot sauna and try and make it up to 30, 35 minutes. Wow. What I tried to do for Badwater, and it was like 5 or 6 weeks of this. My goal was 45 minutes. I never got there. I couldn't do it. I'd signed up for a gym membership. I'd get in this really hot sauna, and in about 35 minutes, I would come crawling out on my hands and knees and lay on the tile floor in the fetal position. People would come into the bathroom at this gym and see this old guy in the fetal position on the floor. They think I'd had a heart attack. Oh my God, sir, should I call front desk? Like, no, I'm just half dead. You know. So I would do this exact same thing for HOTS that I did for Vol State, at least 3 weeks, at least 6 days a week, shooting for half an hour at oppressively brutal hot temperature at night. Why at night? Because afterwards, you are useless. You can't work, you can't think, and you sure as hell can't run effectively.
So what did you do when you got out of the sauna to compensate for all of the water that you've lost? Did you really focus on electrolytes and hydration after each day?
Well, I would certainly bring water in just to drink, right? There's no point dehydrating yourself. That's just
right. And that's what I'm getting at. I don't want someone going into the sauna and sitting there and doing that for like a week and then but like, because like, if you're sweating that much and you're doing it right before an event, then you have to overcompensate with hydration to make sure that you show up to that race at least not underhydrated.
Yeah. I mean, you would stop your heat training 3 to 5 days before the race because you just like you would stop doing long runs. Hopefully at least 3 to 5 days before the race. I mean, you're not going to get any stronger in the last week. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
The heat training you will lose. I can't remember what it's like 1 to 2% per day that you're not heat training, but it's in the weeds. Okay? Just whether you stop 5 days, 7 days, 3 days before the race, I would certainly not heat train any closer than probably 4 days before a race, because why would you put that stress on your body? You want your body to be as frosty and ready to go, and in 4 days you're going to be perfectly hydrated and ready to go.
Yeah.
Right. But you need to be fully recovered. You don't need an extra stress on your immune system before you're about to go haul off for however long, whether it be 100 miles or 300 miles. I'm super excited. Go ahead.
I'm assuming you're planning on this exact same cycle for HOTS then. You're going to sauna training. Yeah. And I'm assuming the same physical training you were doing for Vol State will just carry over into HOTS.
Yeah, although, I hear about the distances that people run. I guess I just don't have that much time. But, my average training, I mean, it varies a lot. But I'm probably about a 40 to 50 mile a week runner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of that's mountainous when I'm at home in Reno, Nevada. So to be fair, 50 miles a week might still be 11 hours. And it's really time on feet that counts, not distance, right? Because 11 hours of mountainous running means a lot of pounding downhill and a lot of struggling uphill. So maybe distance isn't the right. I guess I would say I am no fewer than 6 hours a week and no more than 11 hours a week runner. Because that's what I want.
Do you focus more on long runs, or do you kind of mix it up and do some speed work?
Oh, I should do speed work. I should really do speed work. I just don't like speed work. I really don't. I kind of do what I love long runs. I do. I try and get a 3 to 4 hour run in a week. Not because I think I have to, but because I enjoy it. I remember listening when I first started running, there was this guy doing CrossFit endurance. He's like, you don't need to run long. You don't need to run longer than he went out and he proved that you didn't have to train more than an hour of running to run 100-miler. It's like, yeah, but I don't want to just run an hour because I happen to actually like running.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Well, and you want to enjoy the experience.
I want to enjoy the experience. And you do a slow, because it's a training run. You're not pushing yourself that hard. You do a slow 5-hour run in the mountains. you get back, just life is so good.
Yeah,
It's
it's like
like
a long day of meditation. It's just good medicine.
exactly what it is. I was telling somebody the other day, they said, "Oh, so you must love running." I said, "Well, I mean, look, I used to be a rock climber. I've done, multi-day climbs, hanging, sleeping on the side of the wall, pooping in a tube and carrying that stuff up and scaring the crap out. Tell you something, rock climbing's way more fun than running. I used to be a mountain biker. You know what? The adrenaline, the fun, the skill, mountain biking is way more fun than running. Well, if I'm about experience, then why am I a runner? Why do I mountain bike why don't I mountain bike and climb instead? And the answer, and you guys everybody relates to this. There's something meditative. There is something cathartic. There is something mountain biking is fun in the moment, but it doesn't help me calm the demons in my head. You know
No,
exactly what I'm talking about.
And there's something about not relying on anything to power you, like nothing mechanical. It is you. It is your body. It is you trying to be the best that you can be and not relying on anything else. And you can go spend $400 on a pair of shoes. That doesn't mean you're going to run any faster because it's you, and that's the thing that I love the most about it is bikes. You can go spend $20,000 on a bike and have a bike that's got an advantage. You're not getting that in running. It is you.
Yeah.
And the only way that you get better is that you do it. That's the only way you do it. It's time on feet, like you said.
There's this great internet article. It's sort of this tongue-in-cheek. You guys should read it. I'll send you a link.
I'd love to.
Site that's now closed, but you can still find it at the Gawker Archives, called "You Don't Need That Fancy Shit." And this guy basically goes through talking about, you don't need Reebok, Zig Tech, this, and you don't need that. Is like, there is absolutely nothing made by Lululemon that you need to buy under any conceivable circumstance. It's like, here's what you need, in order to succeed. Because you need shoes, optional, shorts, shirt, optional, and a caffeine and a will to succeed that burns like a fire onto your very soul. And it's kind of true.
I love that. I love that.
Lots of caffeine during that. Lots of caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of a joke article, but it's kind of true. It's like, you don't need, it's just you're just making it too complicated.
Yeah. And I love, one of the guys that we've had on here, and we, he's a good friend. He's a good dude. Greg Armstrong runs in a pair of sandals, give him a plastic bottle, and he's going to go run a race. He doesn't need a water bottle. He doesn't need anything. You don't even need a pack. I've seen him show up with a race in a pair of sandals, not even planning to race. They talk him into it, and they give him a 20-ounce water bottle.
Plastic water bottle.
Dasani water bottle.
Yep. So, and you know what? Would Greg Armstrong be faster if he had all this fancy shit? Maybe. Do you think Greg Armstrong cares? No.
Nope.
No, because it's the experience. Yeah. At the end of the day, and just like everybody has a different goal. And whether that's you go back to the same race every year because you want to try to be better every year, or you go to a different race every time because you want that experience of just getting to do so many different races. We're all different, but it's all leads to that same thing. It's the experience.
Yeah.
Whether it's the experience of getting to meet new people in the community, but it's all about an experience. And you can spend as much money as you want on this or as little as you want. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No one's going to judge you when you walk up wearing a pair of Spaldings. It doesn't matter if you show up barefoot. I've seen people run barefoot.
I ran my last couple of races. Actually, when I just ran plain, I ran it in my old pair of Skechers. Okay. I've run several races in Skechers. And they had chem tape, which is like industrial duct tape, holding them together. I went out and ran 107 miles of plane on a torn meniscus, which was because I'm a moron. But, I ran 107 miles. Well, I didn't know it was torn, but ran 107 miles of plane in shoes with tape on. Because it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah. And And if that's something that is a goal, like if you're training for one specific race and you're really dialed in and you're going to go buy a pair of carbon shoes, great, But when you're first starting out, you don't need any of that stuff, and unless you're trying to be like elite, it's not going to help you that much. It's going to help you comfort wise, maybe, but you don't really need all of that.
And I'm sure we're of the same opinion here. Let's be clear. Like if somebody is competitive, meaning like competing with other people, that's totally fine too. Like it's not a wrong way of doing it. If that's what motivates you is to be faster than other people, God bless you, go for it. You're going to be faster than me because I don't give a shit. But, it's the great thing about competition and people who are competing is that's where you get these world-class, results and you can see what the humans can do, and it's inspiring and it's wonderful, and that's, more power to them. There's nothing wrong with that either. The nice thing that we all love about ultra running is nobody actually cares how fast you are. Everybody accepts everybody for who they are, from where they are and what they're trying to do. And some people are running to be faster than other people, and that's awesome. That's absolutely a laudable goal. And some people are doing it for the experience, and that's awesome. And that's a laudable goal. And some people are doing it to cope with something, and that's awesome. And that's a laudable goal. And it's all good.
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, the experience, one of my favorite races, again, experience. It's too bad it's so hard to get into, but Spartathlon, which is this race in Greece from Athens to Sparta, retracing Phidippides' footsteps, trying to get the Spartans to come help fight the Persians. Yeah, it's this amazing 154-mile race across Greece in, I think it's September when it's hot and humid. Again, heat training. The course, the course is terrible. Like you're running, it's like Fall State. Fall State's course is awful. But I highly recommend the race. Spartathlon, the experience of being high-fived by all these kids as you go through all the villages, the experience of the historic nature of it is what you're after. The scenery, I'll take the scenery of, British Columbia any day of the week. But
Ball State, are you going to get dead possums and semi trucks? So
lots of roadkill.
Lots of roadkill, lots of, miserably not attractive roadsides and trash but you just laugh. It's just, it's the experience.
Yep.
I know you live on the West Coast, so how did you even find out about Ball State? Was it something that was on your radar?
It was when I first started running back in, 2000, I guess I started in 2009. I think my first race was 2010.
Mm-hmm.
There were fewer races then, and I kind of researched everything and, made my ideal A list. What's my bucket list? Actually, once I decided I was actually going to be a runner after the third race. What's my bucket list after I ran Cascade Crest? And I had my A list and my B list, and then everything else was sort of a C list. And every year I used to run 2 races a year. I try and run one A list race and then one what I'd call a sleeper race, something off the radar for the experience. So that was things like Black Hills 100 or Santa Barbara, or, things that the people don't talk about, but are perfectly legitimate, fun, cool races. And Vol State just kind of popped up as this really it was ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous.
And the last annual throws so many people off. They're like, it's the last one.
It threw me off. I was going to apply one year, and I was like, and it had open for the next year, and I saw the previous year was last annual. Like shit, so then I missed the next year because I couldn't sign up because I didn't look for it because it's like an intelligence test. Like, wow, you're really an idiot. Like that's some shitty research. Maybe if you did a little research, you'd see that it was the last annual the last 2 years. But
Awesome.
Yeah. So Vol State it was always a B race but I finished off all of my bucket list races, which were sort of, Badwater, Spartathlon, Hard Rock, Wasatch. There are a lot of mountain races in there. And then once I finished that, and I just wanted more experiences, Vol State was always, I did it fairly late, several years on, because I knew once I figured out that it was always happening, I knew it was going to be around. It's not something that like super fills up. Like eventually you'll get in. It's not like Hard Rock. It took me 9 years to get in Hard Rock.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
7 years of applying, a snow year and a COVID year. Right.
How long did it take you to get into Western States?
It was only like 5 or 6 years. Interesting. Western States was never an A race for me.
Just that experience.
I live in Reno, Nevada. It's a 45-minute drive to the start, right?
Oh, wow.
If I didn't live in Reno, I don't know if I ever would have really applied. When I would have a qualifier, I'd apply. When if I didn't have a qualifier, I wouldn't. And I got into Vol State. I was super excited. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. I need a coach this year. So I went online, got another coach. Because Vol State was absolutely my A race. I'm like, not because I wanted to compete, but because I wanted to have the experience, right? Plus, I was terrified. It's freaking 14 miles. Terrible, right? And so I'm all excited about it. I rarely make a Facebook post. I'm like, I posted, like, this is the thing. And then, like 2 weeks later, I got into Western States. And Bob Hearn actually asked me, he's like, so what are you going to do about Vol State now that you got into Western States? I'm like, oh, Western States is my training run. like Western States, Vol State? Like Western States, the course it's okay. It's got some pomp and circumstance to it. Was it fun? Yeah, it was super fun. I had a great race because I was super chill, but that was my training race. Like that was my last warm up. I did not take that race seriously. Vol State was compare Vol State to Western States. I'll take Vol State any day of the week for the experience.
Oh, wow. So I got a question there about Western States and Vol State. I heard Walt talk about you and your Western States experience, and he said that you negative splitted Western States almost on par with Courtney. Is that true?
Well, I certainly didn't come anywhere close to Courtney. No, but I mean, like our split differential, I think, was very similar. And again, I was trying to run. We can talk about the pacing thing, which I think is interesting. We should really get Bob Hearn on to talk about pacing, like an entire podcast on pacing. Or God, if you could get Nick Curry. So again, I am a huge subscriber to the theory that even to negative split pacing is, if not the fastest way to run, it is absolutely mentally the most enjoyable. And since Western States, I wasn't taking particularly seriously I'm only going to run it once anyway, right? So not just because you can't get in again, but just because I only run everything once. So I want to finish it. So I'm going to run it to finish it. I went out a little too fast and I slowed down, but the pacing was, Western States, you go up and then you're at high altitude. And then everything after that, especially in a cooler year, is easier. So you should be negative splitting it. Right? I mean, if you believe in even to negative splitting, if you look at who's the guy who has the world record for 100 miles, the European guy.
Oh yeah. No,
I'm not sure his name.
You look at, he ran I think he beat Koros's record. It's like 170 or 180 miles in 24 hours. He Sorokin. He didn't negative split it, but he only positive split it by like 5%.
Yeah, it was good pacing. Wow.
That's amazing. You talk to Bob Hearn about pacing. He believes even splitting to negative splitting, or at least close thereof, is the fast. You look at all the marathon times, running up to a marathon, even to negative splitting appears to be the fastest way to run it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though you're more tired the second half. Why does that not hold? At some point that falls apart, right? Is that at 50 miles? Is it at 100 miles? Is it at 200 miles? I don't know. But from my experience, maybe even if you said it's slower to run a 100-miler like that, it is way more fun. Everyone says, oh, in 100-milers, you hear this, oh, you always slow down. There's always a dark time when you're depressed. There's always a time when you're questioning why you signed up. Bullshit. Okay, it's because you're not pacing it right. It's because you made yourself miserable. I have run multiple 100-milers and Vol State, which I did not come close to negative splitting, by the way, with a smile on my face the entire time. There is no need. There's no requirement. There's no necessity to suffer in a negative mindset way. But if you go out too fast, you will hit that dark time. The problem is, how slow do you have to go to even split a race?
How long did it take you to figure that out? So I can imagine, did you start out your first race like that, or did you figure that out years later?
No, I sort of backed into it, because remember I had this coach, and he kept telling me, what my pacing should be, because both of us underestimated my whatever natural speed. And so my first 50-miler, which was whatever it was, it's like flat the first half, it's a bike path the first half, and then the second half is sort of uphill. And I think I even split that because I went out and it felt great, and I was smiling the whole time. I was singing my very first ultra, which was, I'd never run a marathon. The last 10 miles, I'm singing out loud as I'm passing people, because I'm just like listening to tunes and having a great time and bouncing along. And then that first 100, I had a great time pretty much the whole time, because I went out what I thought was too slow. Then as I got more and more experience, I'd like, okay, I need to turn up the heat, and I went to Chimera, and I went out and I hit the first super mountainous race down in California. And I did the first 50 miles in it's like 8.5 hours. And I finished the whole thing in like 20.5. So not an even split, not a negative split. And let me tell you, that last 10 miles, I was pretty much walking, and I was pretty miserable. So I think the answer is, I backed into it by first doing it right, then doing it wrong, then coming back to doing it right, by listening to Bob Hearn, by listening to Nick Curry talk about their experiences. Nick Curry negative split 156 miles on a track.
He's from Arizona, right?
Yeah.
That's the one that Greg was talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I think Greg and him were competing that year for the national team, and Nick was chasing him down.
Yeah, very possible. Although, you say Nick was chasing him down, but Nick was just going to his own pace. Nick was pacing. Yeah. I mean, you look at, I think Bob mapped out for that year somewhere on Bob's blog, he's mapped out everybody's pace from beginning to end. And Bob was pretty much like textbook even splits. The only exception to that was Nick, which was absolute like ruler straight, increasing mile, at the same overall speed, except for the very end where he went faster.
Yeah.
The discipline that takes.
That's what it is. It's discipline.
It's that the discipline to go that slow. Nick has on his blog, you can search for it. It's called Solving the Hard Rock 100. It's an article absolutely worth reading if you care about pacing. He's talking about pacing at Hard Rock, because he did it 6 times, and he sort of, his first time, I won't ruin it. Go read it. It's called Solving the Hard Rock 100. And it tells you everything you need to know about pacing and about how he approached it. And granted, look, he's Nick Curry, so maybe not a world-class athlete, but he's forget about how fast he ran it. It's the fact that he almost negative split hard and felt the best he ever had. Right? It's those two things, his best performance and feeling great the whole time. It's the second part that I care about. It's the experience. I want to enjoy the experience. Why would I want to have it? Yeah, you're going to hurt, like we all do it for the challenge. It's not like it's not challenging.
So what is
Go ahead.
your strategy for pacing? What do you do?
Well, when I do it well, which I did not do on the last two races, so I'd like to say that I've got it locked down. You go out. I generally do it by heart rate. So at my age, I'm 55. I wear a heart rate monitor because heart rate doesn't lie. Okay. And I try and keep my heart rate to never go above, well, theoretically, my plan was, and let's take the Swiss Alps, which is 33,000 vertical feet of climbing. And boy, I suffered at the end of that because I went out too fast. My plan, which I did not stick to, was to never have my heart rate go above 128, which sounds insanely low, but you also got to remember I'm 55 years old. So your max heart rate really does come down as you get older. So that's, if I were in my 40s, that would have been 100. If I was 40 again, that number would have been 141, which is still pretty low.
Yeah.
So the problem is at Swiss Alps, I let my heart rate bounce occasionally up into the low 130s. That did it. It was too much effort early on. And so I suffered. My own damn fault.
So you were letting it go up.
My strategy is to go ultra slow, but the limiter, what is that governor? Like, because you get in the beginning of the race, you're like, yeah, but I'm not working at all. I feel great. It's like, of course you feel great. You're only 20 miles in. Yeah. If you don't feel great at 50 miles in, you're in for a long weekend.
How did you find your governor?
I found that, well, I use the heart rate monitor as that governor. It's the best objective metric you can use, not subjective. Subjective is how do I feel? And don't get me wrong, running by feel is great, right? But I'm a data guy. I'm a nerd. I'm an engineer. And I like there's that saying in science, if you can't, in business, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I can measure heart rate. And if I can actually stick to my control limits, then I can manage it. If I get outside of my control limits, I've lost control. And then you're like, then you're holding on to the tail of the tiger trying to hold on. And sometimes that works, but rarely.
I was going to say, data doesn't lie. That's the one thing about it. Data does not lie. But I'm just trying to think, like, finding your specific governor for each individual, like that's just kind of trial and error as you're running races, trying to gauge that, because everybody's is probably going to be slightly different based on their ability and their athletic, their performance, their training, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, and training does count. I mean, I was probably not properly trained for Swiss Alps either, which certainly didn't help. But I kind of go with this math method, the maffetone. You take, I can't remember what it is, like 180 minus your age, and you add a couple points if you're, above 50, and you subtract a couple points if you train this much, and it's probably plus or minus a couple of beats per minute. I mean, yes, I get there are individual differences, but we're all still human. So there's, it's sort of like some people go, oh, well, this doesn't work for me. And it's like, well, hold on. We're all human beings. We're not that different. So I use heart rate as my metric. Now, again, to be fair, you got to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't like being a data person, if you don't want to be looking at your watch or checking a metric, if that loses enjoyment for you, don't do it. Like, why would you do that? I remember when I was a rock climber, you're supposed to wear these really tight shoes. They're really painful. If they're super tight on your feet so you can really edge well, you do climb better. And there's a bottom of a climb once, and this one guy, newer climber, comes up and goes, my feet really hurt. You look like you have experience. Should my feet hurt this much? And I looked at him, and I'm like, are you enjoying the sport less because your shoes are as tight as everyone tells you they should be? And he goes, yeah. I said, then your shoes are too tight. Because you and I are never going to be world-class climbers.
Yeah.
Love it. Taking yourself too serious.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have fun with it. Like training, the training is what you got to learn to enjoy. The race is kind of like the celebration. When you finally get to go do an event, that's kind of like your celebration.
Mm-hmm.
And just putting all that training and time in and developing, your goal, to see that happen and unfold and you explode in the first 20 miles of a 100-mile race, that all that training just went out the window because you got too excited, and I see that happen even in the races we put on. As a matter of fact, the dirt circuit we just put on not too long ago, Emmanuel, I was yelling at him every loop for like the first 4 loops, and he finally slowed down and he got his 100-mile buckle. And
he'll slow down eventually.
Yeah, right. But that's the thing. It's like you watch this and you kind of see it unfolding, and you're like, please, you got to stop. You got to stop. You got to stop. There's no use in running 8-minute miles in a 100-mile race right now. Save that for the end if you can do it. And that's so hard to do sometimes because you get so excited, you just take off. And we all get caught up in that moment. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how great you are. All of us make that mistake. So it's hard to do, but it goes back to the very same word you've been using several times in this podcast, which is discipline. You have to have discipline to be able to do that.
Yeah. And again, this is what works for me. But if you are not an analytical person and you don't enjoy making pace charts, God, don't make a pace chart. If you don't like the discipline of sitting in a hot sauna and being, quite frankly, it is kind of miserable. If you're like, this actually makes me less happy, even though my race will be faster, then freaking don't do it. Why would you do that? I mean, are you trying to optimize to be an Olympian? Great. Then you have to do it. Okay. But if you're just, we all want to be running when we're 80 or 90, right?
Yep, definitely.
I don't need to. It's like I said with my current knee injury. If I have to not race for a year, like I'm 55. Testosterone is not a strategy. Okay. If I have to not run for a year, but that allows me to run 10 years longer because I took care of myself properly, I'm all about that.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear about your injury. So, and that happened.
Well, I did it to myself.
Last race.
Sorry.
And that happened in your last race, correct?
No, it happened before my last. I think it happened in the Swiss Alps this summer on a couple of falls. Where they send you down at mile 80. They send you down 5,000 feet in 3.5 miles. It's like, really, thanks. And I ate crap a couple of times, and I think I tore it there because after that it felt like tendonitis. In my defense, it did not feel. I didn't know what a torn meniscus felt like, but it really felt like tendonitis. And you'd think I'd know being married to a physical therapist, but I'm stubborn and whatever. So I went out to run plain, and it felt like tendonitis, and it hurt the whole time. And then afterwards, it blew up like a balloon. Even during playing the 107 painful mile, that's a race to run. You want an experience, you go run plain. 64-mile loop, 43-mile loop in the mountains, no aid stations, no support.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
That don't
no
sound...
course marking.
And you did that with a torn meniscus.
Well, I didn't know it was a torn meniscus. Okay. But anyway, as my wife said, it's my own damn fault I tore my meniscus because I probably wasn't strength trained enough. But she gets on my back every now and then.
So I've never even heard of this race, though. I'm going to have to check this out.
You've never heard of the Plain 100?
No,
nope.
I have not.
Oh.
Remember, we're East Coast guys, so we hear about races around here, but not so much.
Like, guys, this is an old school race. I mean, it's only like $140 entry fee. All the proceeds, all profits go to the local search and rescue. This is like a complete volunteer organization. And it's called the Plain 100 because it's near Plain, Washington. Literally, there's a town called Plain, Washington. But also, they just kept it plain. No aid stations, no course markings, no support. There are search and rescue out on course, and you'll come by them, and they'll have all these chairs and fruit out, and they're eating, but if you sit down in one of their chairs, that's a DNF.
Really?
You ask them for directions. You say, which way do I go? Because they're always set up at intersections. They'll be like, I don't know. Like, we're just out here in case somebody actually gets hurt. They literally will not tell you which way to go. They won't tell you anything. It's hilarious.
Do you
so
get
your
like
first loop? It's 64.
like a course map?
Sorry?
Do you get a course map?
Yeah, there's a course map, and they allow you to use a GPS, and load it on your GPS. And I asked him about that, and he said, well, we figure if you can get lost with a map and compass, you're going to get lost with a GPS. It's like we don't really care. You do what you want. But they're like, you're on your own, so you got to carry 64 miles worth of food, and you fill water out of streams, and you get in trouble. You're on your own. You put on your big boy pants or your big girl pants, right? In a way, it's kind of Volstatish.
Yeah. That's cool. I've never even heard of that. But what's funny is a guy that I ran against in a backyard, that really, really great dude, Piotr. I see he's ran it in 25 hours. He's a good runner. But
25 hours? Holy crap.
Yeah.
That's insane.
The course record is 22.
Yeah, which is also crazy insane. This is not like, it's only 22,000 vertical feet of climbing, right?
Yeah, only.
And it's technical. Yeah, but I can run that. I should be easy sub 24 hours. It took me every ounce of I didn't even break 30 hours. I mean, it's harder than it looks. So much fun.
But you have to carry all your own food and everything, right? And then you just have to restock with your water is, I guess, from rivers, streams, whatever you can find.
There's one section where you go, I think it's 30 miles without any streams. So you got to, have enough water carrying capacity to handle that. But you know it in advance, right? There's no secret. And then you're just, again, in a Volstatish way, it's like when you're out there and you're like, this is ridiculous. You just laugh. It's so ridiculous.
That's so cool.
It's so just stupidly ridiculous that it's hilarious.
I love it. That's awesome.
Fantastic race.
I might put that on the bucket list.
There you go.
That's really cool. So let me ask you a question, and then we'll jump into some other questions here in a few minutes. And this is going to be a hard question for you to answer, and it may be like a couple, but of all the races that you've done, which one are you the most proud of?
I would say, actually, I know the answer to this. This is not a hard question. Moogie Monster, which is, it's a hard 100. Now I think it's 100. It used to be 108 miles, but they changed it when Jamil Curry took over the race. 108 miles, super, kind of 24, 23-ish thousand vertical feet, some technical, sections that are just insane. I went out too fast. So earlier in my running, went out too fast. I was having a great race. Of course I was having a great race because I went out too fast, right? And I died hard. I mean, I died. This was my classic. This was the worst of going out too fast and just dying. And I came into this one aid station in the middle of the night. And the problem was I got to the point where I couldn't breathe. It's like, I just couldn't catch my breath. And I just didn't have my running, and it was cold. And I'm a minimalist. So, I had like a long sleeve shirt. No, it's no rain. It's Arizona. So, but I wasn't running enough. I couldn't run. I literally couldn't run. I mean, if a bear was chasing me, okay, maybe I could have run for a bit, but I couldn't run. And so I came into this aid station, sat down, and immediately went hypothermic. Sat at this aid station fire. I had a drop bag there. So I put on two like Ghost Whisperer jackets, and I'm sitting by this, and a pair of tights, and I'm sitting by this fire, just shivering, just absolutely shaking, shivering cold. And this is mile 75 or 80 or something. I mean, I got a ways to go, and I knew I couldn't run. It's pretty flat 7 miles, flat runnable 7 miles to the next aid station. And I'm like, I got to get out of here, or I'm just screwed. I was at this aid station for probably 30, 40 minutes. I'm just shivering and hypothermic. And they were boiling water and giving me boiling water. And so finally, I did something smart. I filled my 2 water bottles with boiling water, and I dropped them down the front of my shirt to keep me warm, to give me some core warmth. And I set out on the 7-mile stretch. And it took me exactly 3 hours to go 7 miles on the flats. And near the end, like walk for like a little bit, I'd sit down on a stump, like when you're just dead and you're looking for every excuse to sit down or lay down. And I'm probably half a mile from the next aid station, and they came out looking for me because they thought something had gone wrong, because they knew that I left in terrible condition. And I'm like, no, I got it. And I made it there, and they almost, I think they were almost going to pull me. And I'm like, no, I mentally I was there. And, when I had started to die, I was in, not that I cared that, I guess I probably cared back then. I was in 3rd place, and I was like going to have this great time, and, and now I'm miserable, and I'm, instead of finishing in 26 hours, I'll be lucky if I finish. And I thought I wasn't even going to make the cutoff, which was like 36. I literally didn't think I could make the cutoff. And I thought about dropping. I really did. Mm. And then I thought to myself, well, right now I'm in 5th place, and there's a bunch of people behind me. And I'll bet you every single one of those people wishes they were where I was. I'm not an elite runner. How arrogant of me to drop because I'm having a bad day. I literally thought this to myself. If I drop now, I'm not injured, I'm just suffering. That is disrespectful to every runner who was given less genetic, just, picking the right parents. It is disrespectful to every runner behind me to just drop because I'm having a bad day. And I toughed it out and finished in it was 32 hours or something, so add 6 hours to where I theoretically probably could or should have been. And that's my favorite finish because I didn't quit.
Was that your hardest finish?
Yeah, it's probably my hardest finish.
Sounds like
my most miserable finish. I mean, and look, these experiences between, Spartathlon and Vol State and Hard Rock, which also didn't go very well. And some of these other, it's what's the hardest? I don't know if you can define that. The hardest for me was where I sabotaged myself at Mogollon Monster, and I had to come to terms with am I going to finish? Now, look, if you're injured, yeah, quit, 100%. Don't risk your health. Right? I have dropped from one race. I have one DNF on my record, and that DNF is at Uwharrie out in North Carolina, and it's because I pulled a hamstring. It's could I have walked another 3 laps? Sure. Well, why would you do that? It's just stupid. To prove that you're tough enough to go through an injury and maybe sabotage your health? No, it's makes sense. But if you're just miserable because you're feeling sorry for yourself, come on.
Because you made a bad decision,
Yeah, or just luck of the draw. I mean, some days you just don't have a good day.
Some days it's not there. You're right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes you ask people what's their hardest race, and they're like, oh, I don't really, they're all hard, or, it's hard to compare. But, the truth is it's not the race. It's how did you, what was the hardest race for you and why? Because you can have the worst race ever and it be a track race because you made a bad choice, and you went out at a 6-minute pace and you thought we were going to hold that for 24 hours, So it's
Walls in last year's Vol State, the skin off the bottom of your feet comes off, right? Physically, I saw him when he was walking along in his flip flops at Vol State because he couldn't wear shoes, And he's like, Ken, physically, I feel great. My legs could run. My lungs can run. My attitude bike can run. I can't run. And you know what? He's Walt. So he just sucked it up and he dealt with it. I'm not sure if the skin had fallen off both my feet if I would have finished. Like, I might have called that one. He's a tougher man than I am, but
absolutely. I'm so impressed that he still finished in 5 days.
I know it.
In flip-flops. Like,
unbelievable.
Impressed.
Walt's an interesting. So those people who don't know Walter, he's the guy. He had done this half hundreds, where he ran 50 100-milers in a year, and I remember he was partway through this. I met him I was running Ouray that year, which Ouray, by the way, 42,000 vertical feet of climbing in 105 miles. Like, this thing is no freaking joke. I had a great race there. That was great because I paced well. And Walter, this is one of his 100-milers every week is Ouray. And I think at some point he was saying, I don't know if I can finish. I said, Walter, it's actually really important that you can finish this. And he's like, why do you say that? I said, Walter, don't take this the wrong way. You're not a very talented runner. And he just laughs because he knows it's true. He's super. I mean, yes, Walter's really good at racing 100-milers because he trains like nobody's business. But if you took core genetic, like, are you an Olympian on the scale of 0 to Olympian, Walter's just kind of an average runner. He performs better than average because he's tough as hell and he trains like crazy. I said, Walter, it's important for you to finish the half hundreds because you're proving what the average human can do. If Killian ran 100 or 50 100-milers in a year, everybody would be impressed. And I'm sure they'd all be super impressive. And everybody go, wow, Killian's really amazing, but he's Killian. Right? Just because Killian can run, let's say he had done it 50 100-milers in a year, does not mean I can do it. But if Walter can do it, it means anybody who puts their mind to it can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I love that guy. I mean, he is, and he knows this. I mean, no disrespect when I say he's just not that talented of a runner. He is genetically, he's just an average guy who trains like crazy town. And yep. I mean, the respect that he deserves for that is, again, nobody cares who the fastest person is. We're all here for our own experience. And Walter demonstrates what's possible for all of us.
Yeah. And he's still going. I mean, he's about to hit his 100.
Almost.
I think he just finished 98. He's got 2
He's
legs.
out of his freaking mind. He is truly, Walter, you are a lunatic. And I love you for it. You are truly a lunatic.
I love reading some of his reviews on Facebook. Like the whole treadmill debacle was just hilarious.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Hey, it's even better, his new one about the shoes.
Yeah, I read
that. Was hilarious.
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, I hate the marketing. I don't really like these shoes. I'm on the team, but I don't really like their shoes. Oh, he's hilarious.
He was great when we had him on the podcast. I mean, he went into details about all the stuff, going in for those 50 100s and the amount of, like, the spreadsheets and all that stuff that I couldn't do, but he had it down to every penny he spent. It's like, what, $30,000 that year, mm-hmm. which is crazy that he kept track of that. And then the amount of money he spent on those races, but
but he did for 30,000. If you look at how much you spent on doing 50 100-milers,
oh yeah,
might actually be more than $30,000.
I would, because I wouldn't spreadsheet like he did.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and
your partner would kill you.
Oh yeah, she would.
Yeah, I love Walter because he is. I mean, that is part of what makes this sport so wonderful. It's like it's the every person's sport.
Right.
because
And
nobody cares.
it's just like,
Nobody cares how fast you are.
right. And you got Ed the Jester. I mean, this dude's so fun. We had him on here, and he had the record before Walt, and now he's trying to get the record back. And he was telling us his whole story, and it's so fun. Like, I mean, it's so fun just to meet all these people and to get to know their stories and who they are. And like you said, I mean, none of us are elite runners. We're not Olympians, but we're doing the best we can, and we're having fun, and that's really what matters. And if you put enough effort into it, you can be really good at whatever you choose to do. And it's finding whatever you're passionate about to make sure that you put that effort in. And for me, I'm glad I found it. I'm just kind of like you. I found it in a way that there was a lot of bad things going on in my life, and I just started running. I was running a mile a day, and then ended up, signing up for ultras and all that. So, it's whatever leads you in that direction, so be it.
And are you a better person, a happier person, a kinder person, a more thoughtful person, and a healthier person for it?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
That's where it's at.
Yep.
And honestly, you don't have to run ultras. You could be 5Ks. Again, this is what I love about running. Somebody gets out there and they're maybe not in the greatest shape. They're heavy. And everybody's cheering them. It's like, oh my God, kudos, hats off to you. It's so inspiring to see that.
Yes.
To see people, everybody loves rooting for people who are overcoming obstacles and challenges.
Everybody loves an underdog.
Oh God. I just don't think you see that in cycling. No offense to the cyclists out there.
Yeah, it's just because cycling is a very expensive sport.
Very.
Running is not. It's just like what we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast. Like, we have people come out to our races. We had a lady finish Gone Loco last year. She was 300 something pounds, lost a ton of weight, come out and ran a 33-mile race. And she said, and she crossed the finish line and just started crying. And she said, I never thought I would ever be able to do this. Oh. And that is the shit that makes this all so fun to see, is like people that completely change the course and the direction of their life for the better and do something that they never dreamed was even possible. And to see that emotion come through at a finish line, it's priceless. Just priceless.
And then not only is she crying, but you're probably tearing up.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It was rough.
I mean, it's just amazing to see.
A lot of these people, when they cross that finish line, and you've been watching them all day, 6 or 12 or 24, you've been watching them. And then they'll come in and they finished and they just start just tearing up and just crying because they've done something they didn't think they could do. And as the race directors, we're like, oh gosh, because, that emotion hits you too, because you're seeing them do something so, crazy and, they're reaching their limits. And you're like, oh, I'm about to lose it with them. And, you're trying your best to hold it together. And it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have you cried in a race? And not because you're in pain, but just because it's so emotional.
Yep.
Right. We had a guy come out and run one of our newer races, the Cherokee, and he won the 70K. And this is a mountain race in the Cherokee National Forest. He couldn't walk 3 years before. Completely paralyzed. Yep. Got a disease, completely paralyzed, had to learn how to walk all over again, started running, come out and ran and won our race.
That is amazing. Oh, it's so emotional. It's beautiful.
He crossed the finish line and he just absolutely started crying and was just sharing his story. And it was just amazing. And, that's the thing. It's just so inspiring to see that people don't give up on themselves. That's the thing. It's like you just need one thing to motivate you, to make you better, to make you to feel passion about something, and it will completely change your life. It doesn't have to be running, but you have to figure out what that is.
Yeah. Although there's something about running that, for me at least,
Agreed. I agree with you.
It is more it calms the demons in my head the way that mountain biking or rock climbing or skiing or all those things are super fun in the moment, but as a life-changing event, it's just not as life-changing.
Well, you're probably a really good test subject to speak about that because you've done basically every sport that I can think of.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, rock climbing, like alpine rock climbing, when you're 50 miles from 30 miles from a roadhead and you're 500 feet off the deck and you don't know if your gear is going to hold. I mean, it's terrifying, and you got to make really good decisions under pressure. Like, if you don't make really good decisions under pressure, you might actually not make it. So you make good decisions under pressure, right? Like and the risk is whatever you want to make it. And so there is something nice about that. But again, would I rather be a rock? Do I get more? I don't know what it is. It's something about running. It's just, it's the thing I want to do for life. I find joy. It's a joy thing. There's something about the word joy. I had this, I don't know if I came up with it, but I had this saying to myself, you don't run with your legs, you run with your heart. And I'm not talking about cardio. I'm talking about love. You run with your heart. And other sports just weren't that for me.
Yeah, I agree. I've not done as many sports as you. I've done a couple, and I'm mountain biking too, but running is the one that stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Matt, cool. We're going to start some questions real quick, but I want to start with the very first question that we ask every listener, Ken. And you basically just answered this question, but I want to ask it anyways to get the full answer. But why do you run? Like we just talked about, when everything's so hard and everything is going wrong, why do you do it?
Peace. It makes me peaceful. It calms we all have our demons. We all have our ghosts. Some people have been through, quite frankly, way more than others. And I've been through some stuff, but less than others. But for me, I've always been somewhat haunted by whatever my personal experience is. And running finds me peace, and it brings me joy in a way that nothing else does.
And that, to your point, like, joy is so important.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't find joy in what you're doing, it's not going to stick. So I think that is key.
Yeah, it's interesting if you run with a heart rate monitor and you're just out there training, and then you force a smile on your face, your heart rate goes down. Your pace goes up at the same heart rate. It's psychosomatic. Obviously, it's not like you've actually changed something. There's just something about joy and running that goes well together.
Yeah, and every now and then you get just in that right moment where everything is just feels great, and you feel like you're 10 feet tall, and you're just like one out there on the trail just moving, and it's just the best feeling ever. It's and I know people call it the runner's high, but like, it's real. Like, when you are in your moment and in your zone, there's nothing like it. It's just so peaceful, so cool, and just perfect. It's so meditative.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Williams, we're going to turn it over to you.
Right, we got a couple questions about Vol State.
Of course we do.
Most people over here know Vol State. The first one says, how many miles per day did you do at Vol State?
Ooh, good question. I think I did. I'd have to go back and look. I mean, the whole thing was 3 days, 17 hours, 3 minutes and 22 seconds. I'll never forget that. I don't remember most of my times, but I remember that. I think the first day I did about 110. So, the interesting part was the sort of, when do you sleep? This is the big question. And I thought I actually figured it out at Vol State, and then at Moab I found out that I hadn't figured it out. But so everyone said at Vol State you should sleep when it's hot during the day and you should run through the night. And I read everything Bob had written, because Bob's a very prolific writer, and he's super talented. I didn't expect to hit his times, but Bob was like, I hit the hotel during the heat of the day, and then I try and run through the night. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do what Bob did. Like, maybe not the same times. It turned out I was on a similar time, but so I get into so I run through the first night. I will now argue that was a mistake. But I was feeling good. Whatever, it's the first night, you got your adrenaline, everybody's feeling good. And I get to that, I'm coming up to that first afternoon, and I check into a hotel, the Commodore, something like whatever hotel Bob checked into the year before. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be in here for 2.5 hours. I'm going to, make sure I sleep for, hour and a half, 2 hours. And I laid down. I maybe got 30 minutes of sleep. I just wasn't tired. It was the middle of the day. Part of it was everybody was also like, you need to sleep during the heat, but I didn't find it that hot because I heat trained. And I get to that night, and I am exhausted. And I remember I thought a lot about this while I was running, because of course I didn't have any headphones, so I had plenty of time to think. I was like, maybe this strategy is wrong. If I'm normally awake during the day and the heat isn't hurting me, and I normally sleep at night, maybe I should be sleeping at night. And so that night I found, even though I'd slept half an hour during that day, I found an abandoned warehouse, some off in the woods, and there was an upstairs loft that I could get into with a ladder, and I just kind of went in it and found some bubble wrap and wrapped myself up in it and slept for, good 2 hours. Felt great. And then I was like, okay, I'm running through the heat of the day and I'm sleeping at night. And that was absolutely the plan. So it was probably 100 and some ish for the first 24 hours. And then, obviously 3 days, 17 hours for 314 miles. I got slower over time, but kind of like 100 and then probably 85 and then whatever was left.
How did you know where did you find the ladder to get to the loft?
Well, I saw a building, and I'm like, it was a building, and it looked abandoned, which it was, which was good. And it was clearly some old warehouse, and maybe it was abandoned. I don't know. I tried the door just to see if I could go lay inside this building. Probably shouldn't have done that, but anyway, it was locked. It's fine. I'm not going to break in, obviously. And I went around the back to see if there was a tarp I could sleep under, or I just wanted to get off the road too, right? It was, and then I saw that there was this open loft area, and there was a ladder up to it. And I'm like, so I go up the ladder. There's this open wooden floor, and there was some bubble wrap and some cardboard, and it's like, oh man, this is luxury.
Well, the next question is, did you change shoes during Vol State, or did you just wear your one pair?
I only brought one pair. Remember, I went super minimalist. Now, what was my plan if that didn't work? Well, my plan was then to get any pair of, let's say those shoes didn't work. I had, full medical, and I had needle and thread to either sew it myself or sew equipment. I was ready to cut the toes out of the shoes, cut the shoes open if they swelled, do whatever. But if I had to, I'd find a Walmart or a Quickie Mart or a dime store, and I would just buy something. That was my plan, because I wasn't going to carry a second pair of shoes. Here is what I carried. Do you guys have show notes where you could link? So I could send you literally everything. I have a list of everything I have and the exact weight.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we can put it in there for sure if you want to share it.
Down to the gram. Now, I knew I was pretty sure I could finish in 5 days. So if you're an 8-day finisher, this is probably not enough stuff. Okay. Here's what I carried that I did not use. Some of my medical stuff. I never used my needle and thread. I never used my razor blade. I never used, I brought some KT tape. I never used it, but I carried it the whole way. I had some extra lube that I didn't use. I carried one spare pair of shorts, never used it. And I carried one spare pair of socks, because I figured if I wear through my socks because I get grit or something in them, that's something that at Walmart is not going to work well, right? You want something that's going to have good slip against your shoes and not against your feet. You want a good pair of socks that work for you. So I carried a spare pair of socks, never wore them. Spare pair of shorts, never wore it. If I were to do Vol State again, I would probably carry the spare socks, but I would not carry spare shorts. But remember, extreme optimization here. I ran most of Vol State shirtless. So I had a short sleeve shirt made by Rabbit. So it had buttons on the front. So it's a little heavier than a normal shirt. But the plan was I had a visor, right? Because you want to keep your sun out of your eyes. You say, well, but you want to keep the sun off your head and the sun off your shoulders. So what I would do is in between towns, I would just rip open the shirt because it's a Rabbit shirt that has little snaps. And I'd put that on my head and then I'd put the visor on top of that, right? So then I've got this thing draping and flowing over my shoulders, protecting me from sun. But as I'm running, the wind's blowing and you're shirtless and you're like, oh, but you need to be covered up in the sun. It's like, nah, that's not how physics works. Other things that I did that were super smart that I've actually now applied to other races. So I'm wearing naked. So why didn't I want a vest? Well, I didn't want it swinging on my back to chafe. I knew I wanted to go shirtless as much as possible. You can't go shirtless if you're wearing a vest because you'll rip the skin right off your back. Tried that. Doesn't work. And so I had these two, spandex naked bands around my waist. So I had a couple of extra Ziploc bags. And every time I hit a store where there was ice, I would fill them with ice. And you're going to say, oh, did you put them around your neck with a bandana? Or did you put them on your head? So I had three Ziploc bags. I'd put one on my head with the shirt over it, right? My little Lawrence of Arabia shirt with my visor to keep my head cool. I would fill the other two with ice and I would tuck them in the naked band next to my kidneys. People talk about these ice bandanas keeping you cool because it's up against your arteries, right? Where there's a lot of blood flow. But I'll tell you where there's a lot of blood flow and heat exchange, it's your kidneys. It's where everything's getting filtered. Your kidneys are one of the biggest heat dumps you've got. And so you put ice packs against your kidneys, it is a game changer. And so I used that at Western States. I carried 2 empty Ziplocs. I'd get to an aid station. Everybody's like putting it in their bandanas and having it in their neck, which helps, and dripping down their back. I put it against my kidneys.
That's
game changer.
I've never heard of anybody doing that.
First time I've ever heard that.
That's because I invented it at Vol State. I mean, think about it. Look, optimizing running is the Venn diagram intersection of physiology and physics, right? Physics, lightweight. Physiology, keep cool. What's the best way to keep cool? Cool your blood that gets to your core. How are you going to do that? Ice on your neck, ice on your head. There are these sort of, the football players, they pull this slight vacuum on their hands and they cool the hands and that can really cool your core quickly. Well, you can't do that while you're running. Okay, where do you dump a lot of heat and have a lot of blood flow? It's your kidneys. Why wouldn't you want to cool your kidneys? What do they do in hospitals when people are overheating? They cool your kidneys. When you're wearing a naked band, one of those, flexy things around your waist, you can tuck an ice bag right next to your kidneys, right on the skin. I'm telling you, magic.
Yeah, that's pretty smart.
I'll have to try that.
Ball State hack right there.
Any hot race hack, especially, the problem with Vol State, I only had to carry the weight of 3 extra empty Ziploc bags, so it wasn't that much weight, but it was weight. And believe me, I was going to the gram. But in a regular race, on a hot race like a Western States or wherever, they have ice at every aid station. So every 6 to 8 miles, you've got ice almost full time on your kidneys. It's a game changer.
Remember that out here?
I've never heard of that. That's my trot.
All right. So for your Mountain 100s, do you wear a vest or do you just wear your naked bands?
Naked band. Well, okay, asterisk. Depends on the mountain. So for hard rock, right? So hard rock is a hard mountain 100. You are exposed. There can be lightning storms. There can be hail. you got to, unless you're a moron, they don't tell you what to carry. Like, you can carry nothing if you want, but you're an idiot. You really need a seam sealed rain jacket. You need to have a pair of tights with you. You need to have a headlamp. I learned the hard way to always carry a spare headlamp after I lost my light 3 times in 2 races. Anyway, learned that the hard way. So I always carry a small spare headlamp. And then, there's enough time in between that it was just too much stuff to fit in one naked band. Now, would I have done hard rock with 2 naked bands? And the answer is theoretically yes, except that coming down, there's just too much chance for something to bounce out coming down really steep declines. But like something like plane, where you're carrying 16 hours of food with you, you just need the carrying capacity of a vest. But in any normal given 100, like take San Diego. San Diego's a hot 100. I wore a naked band. So here's what I had. I had my shoes, my socks, my shorts, a short sleeve ultralight shirt, which I then almost immediately took off. No sunglasses, wait. No hat, visor, wait. And a naked band. And people are like, well, you can't carry enough. Well, hold on. Here's what you can carry in a naked band. I can tuck my shirt in it. I can carry 2 full water bottles. That's 2 hours, right? I can carry 2 hours of food. I can carry 2 headlamps. I can carry a seam-sealed rain jacket. I can carry a buff. And I can carry gloves. Exactly what else do you need in a 100-miler? Where there's an aid station every 6-7 miles. Yeah. Does anybody with a giant pack carry more than that?
No,
not really.
No. In a remote mountain race, some people carry bivvies. Great, carry a pack, right? There are different types of races out there. And you should never risk your safety, because then you, by nature, endanger other people's safety, right? Because another racer is just not going to leave you. And now you risk putting them into hypothermia. You got to be responsible. Right. You can cut the margins, but in any, you look at what you can fit in a naked band and you're like, why? I don't know.
To me, I have to look into a naked band. What is your preferred nutrition during your races?
Ooh, good question. Well, so, early on, when I was trying to optimize everything and be as fast as I could be, it's like, I'll do gels and I'll do perpetuum and I'll do, and now that I'm more of a joy runner, I just eat what I want to eat. I am lucky enough that I don't have digestive issues, which is probably partially because I just don't push myself that hard, which is another advantage, by the way, of good pacing, is that you don't get nauseous as easily. Because you're just not pushing that hard. You're not taxing your body to the limit. I never tax my body to the limit because I, drip little bits out at a time. But I generally, if I'm really trying to get a good time for me in a 100-miler, I would do probably half gels, half real food for the first 7 hours, and after that, I just can't touch gels. If I start to feel a little queasy, I find the chews work well. Let's pretend this is a normal 100-miler with aid stations with, a variety of stuff. But then I'll also just eat real food. Take training, for instance. When I go out on a 5-hour run or a 7-hour run, or I'll do solo 9-hour runs in the mountains, it's like, oh, do you carry, ultra gels and goos and tailwind? And it's like, no, I carry a bean burrito and a sweet potato with avocado in it. And so here's a funny, my brother used to work for Tailwind. He's a doctor. My brother on the back of the Tailwind's recovery thing, it's actually got his name on it because he designed Tailwind's recovery thing. And when he's working for Tailwind, he's like, Ken, you used to be using Tailwind to optimize your training. I'm like, Art, I just ran a 7-hour run on 3-year-old Halloween candy. And you know what? It was fucking delicious. I just don't care. I want to go have fun. I had Halloween candy. It was old. It was probably stale. It was delicious. I ate it on my run. Halloween candy worked great for 7 hours in the mountains. Don't give me this crap that I need Tailwind to be able to perform. Now, Would I have optimized my training and gotten a better training effect if I'd used Tailwind instead of, stale Mars bars? Yeah, probably. I don't know. Would I have had as much fun? Probably not. I go out for a long run. I want a bean burrito. I want avocado on toast. I want, it's fun. Tastes good.
Well, I've never ate a bean burrito on my training runs.
Why not?
I don't know.
I know I'm the gels guy. I'm taking gels.
Oh,
I do the gummies.
I'm also too cheap. Remember, I'm buying half my training shoes I'm finding at the used equipment store I found 3 pairs of Solomon mountain shoes used for $45 each. And so I bought all 3. So I'm good for another year and a half. This is great.
Okay. If on my training runs, it's gummies and applesauces. I mean, those work great for me.
And do you love it?
Oh yeah, they're good. I'm excited when I eat them. So
then you're doing it right.
I did have one buddy who showed up for a long training run with a bag of frozen burritos, and what he said made sense. He's like, as I run and I get hungry, they thaw out, so then I eat them.
I'll tell you what wasn't good. So Swiss Alps, it's Switzerland. It's a race put on by a company, nice people. Aid stations had very nice people, but they're trying to, make money. This is not the plain 100 where it's all volunteer and it's all about love. This is, it's a business, and that's fine. Beautiful race, by the way. Kind of expensive. Wow, Europe has crappy aid stations. I ran the first 50 miles on M&Ms and potato chips because that's what they had.
Wow.
And I had a friend run it before, and he said he had his wife crew him. And he's like, oh yeah, she brought me food because the food was terrible at the aid station. Food was terrible at the aid station. You can run 50 miles on M&Ms and potato chips, but cool.
It's not. Yeah, it's not ideal.
Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, and my wife was there, but I told her to go. Fine, she saw me a couple of. I don't do crews. I don't do pacers. I just want experience.
That was my next question.
Oh, really?
Do you have crews for 100 miles?
No.
Nope.
God, no. Well, I mean, I love my wife dearly. My wife does not love running. She hates running. We love each other dearly. I wouldn't want her to have to wait around. Sometimes she likes to go see me and laugh at me. She and some of her friends crewed me when I did Badwater. In Badwater, you need a crew, and a pacer is really fundamental because they're spraying you down. So I had a pacer at Badwater, 100%. But a lot of these races, like people get to Vol State and they're like, oh my God, I can't have a pacer. It's like, I never have a pacer. It wasn't that big Spartathlon. There's no pacers. So what? I never have a pacer. I think it was Carl Meltzer who said, yeah, my left leg paces my right leg paces my left. You want to get into your own mind. You want to, interestingly, I love pacing people. I'll pace anyone, anywhere, at any pace, especially if they're hurting. Love pacing. It's like service. You're serving your runner, but I don't like being paced because it allows me to give voice to pain.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. Let's see. The last question is, what is your favorite aid station food?
Well, I mean, it's all from experiences where, you're craving something and you go, actually, I'm going to tell you 2 stories. First, I'm going to tell you my favorite aid station story or favorite aid station food. And then I'm going to tell you, because it relates to aid station food, my best aid station story, which is a good story. It's too bad people don't get video on this podcast, do they? Because
they do.
Oh yeah. Okay. So my favorite aid station, it was Fat Dog. It was 120 miles, and it was the middle of the night. It was freaking cold, and these guys had, actually, I had 3 stories. So these guys had, what did they have? I was eating cheese at the time. They had cheese quesadillas with avocado and hot sauce, and it just hit the spot. Another amazing experience, Hard Rock. So everybody knows, if you know Hard Rock, there's this Kroger's Canteen, which is this very famous aid station. It's at 13,000 feet up on this ridge. There are no roads there. It takes them 5 days of backpacking in food and water because there's no trail up to it. And they have to go up a scree slope that's like, go look up Kroger's Canteen. There's videos on it. It's this, they're wearing climbing helmets because of the rock fall. It's like the side, it's, the entire aid station. It's on a plateau on this ridge. You climb up the scree field. You hit this plateau that's smaller than the size of this hotel room. And then you go down a scree field. So you go up to this thing. They've 5 days to get up there. It's famous, and it's always staffed by like famous ultra runners. So you get up there. I get up there, and it's like 2 a.m., 13,000 feet. And I get up there, and I can't remember who it was who waited on me, but it's some famous ultra runner who's won stuff. But they're serving. They're doing their service, and by the way, there's like a 5-year wait list to even work at Kroger's Canteen. It's that famous.
Wow. So
I get up there and the guy's like, "Would you like a shot of whiskey or vodka?" No, I don't drink. But thanks. He goes, "How about a cheese quesadilla? Would you like a hot cheese quesadilla?" And I looked at him, I said, "God, that sounds great, but I'm trying to be vegan this race." And he goes, "Oh, we got vegan cheese." 13,000 feet. And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you have vegan cheese at Kroger's Canteen at like 13,000 feet. Yeah, I'll have a vegan quesadilla." And he looks at me and goes, "Do you want that on regular or gluten-free?" Like,
that is awesome.
Ridiculous. Okay, so now my aid station story. Wasatch. This is a good one to end on. Wasatch 100. It's a hard. Do you know Wasatch?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's in Utah. It's point to point. Beautiful race. Super well run. Reputation for just rugged. I mean, it's like 24,000 vertical or something, but technical and hard. Hot up on the ridge. It can be bad weather. I mean, this is the mountains of Utah, and it's a hot day. And I'm coming into aid station at like mile 35 or 40, and it's a hot day. I'm doing well. Going out a little fast, but doing well. But I'm hot, and I'm craving stuff. You know what I'm craving? I'm craving fruit. I'm craving like orange slices. I'm craving, watermelon. I'm like, aid station. I got my pace chart. I know the aid station's coming up in like 2 miles, then a mile, and I'm fixated. I want fruit. And I get to this aid station, wonderful aid station. Wasatch is really laid out. It's, like a typical awesome ultra aid station. And they got all this food laid out. And I look at this one bowl, and there is this melon. I'm like, oh my God, melon. It's this pale yellow, perfect looking melon. And I'm like, oh my God, that looks awesome. And I reach my hand in and I grab it and I shove it in my mouth, expecting this awesome melon. And I was so disappointed because it was like it wasn't sweet. It was mealy. It was really, and I'm thinking to myself as I'm kind of working this tasteless melon down, like, should I say anything? And the aid station woman's there looking at me, and I go, you know what? I should probably tell. I said, excuse me. I don't mean to be rude, but that is the worst melon I have ever had. You're supposed to be polite to aid station. You're really supposed to be polite. But I'm like, I gotta let him know. Like, that is the worst melon I have ever had. She looks at me. She goes, "Those are potatoes." I was so fixated on fruit that I mistook peeled boiled potatoes for melon visually. And I was so fixated that even when I put it in my mouth, I didn't recognize it as potato. That's ultra.
So, were they just regular white boiled like potatoes? Like,
they were regular white boiled potatoes with a slight yellow tint to them.
Did they have?
I thought it was the worst. It was the worst melon I'd ever had. So it wasn't frickin' melon. But for me to say this to this woman, and she just looks at me with this look. She's like, "Those are potatoes." Yeah. That's my aid station story.
Oh, I wonder if there was like some sleep deprivation there, you know?
It's only 35 miles in.
Oh, yeah, I guess not.
Oh, I got put in my place. That was good. I'll never forget that as long as I live. I tell that at aid stations sometimes, and people just crack up.
Well, Ken, I can say that's the first time I've ever heard of anybody mistaking a potato for a melon. So,
yeah.
But I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story and coming on the podcast with us. And honestly, like just some of your expertise and some of the stuff you've learned has been really fascinating, because some of the stuff I've not heard, especially with the ice on the kidneys. So,
Nope.
But thank you so much for sharing all that. We would love to have you back on here again in the future.
Well, thank you so much. It was super fun. I could talk about running forever. I love running. It's the people, the community, the joy, the experience. It can be a life-changing experience. And runners, they'll help anybody at any speed, at any time. It doesn't matter how good. What does good even mean? It doesn't matter how fast or slow relative to meaningless metrics. It's life-changing.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. And we can see the joy that you have when you speak about it. So that just comes out honestly. So awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Ken. And if you don't care, hang on just for a minute after we close the podcast. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Ken.